In this episode, we're going to look at how to implement a subnetted IPv6 addressing scheme. I'll show you how to do it, and we'll talk about the concepts along the way. Network administrators must know how to implement IPv6 in their networks. We've been asked to set up a network for use by the sales staff for a customer demonstration. The network will use a series of consecutive IPv6 subnets for 4 LANs. Our job is to assign the subnets to the LAN and configure the routers and PCs with IPv6 addressing. We have to make certain that to configure all the necessary components for IPv6 routing on the routers. Greetings to all my tech heads out there in the KevTechify nation, and if you're new here, welcome. This episode is part of my series on configuration examples for the CCNA. I'm Kevin here at KevTechify. Let's get this adventure started. Implement a subnetted IPv6 addressing scheme. I have the packet tracer lab open. On the left side, we have our working area where we're going to do all of our configurations and set up our devices. On the right side, right bottom, I have the standard packet tracer window. We can use that to check our results as we work through the lab. In the upper right, I have the Word document of the packet tracer window, the instructions. Why I have the Word document is there are questions we have to fill in the table. We have information to fill in. That will allow me to fill that information in and save that. That's why I have the Word document right here. Here we have our addressing table. Notice in our addressing table, we have 2 routers, we have 4 PCs. That's what we have over here in our network. We're not doing anything with the switches in this lab, so we're not concerned about that at this point. We have our interfaces. We have IPv6 addresses. We have 5 fields here that are empty. As we work through this lab, we're going to come up with these addresses. We're going to come back up here and fill these out. Our objectives here: determine IPv6 subnets and the addressing scheme, configure the addresses on routers and PCs, and step 3 is to verify our IPv6 connectivity. Instructions. Determine instructions. Step 1. Determine IPv6 subnets and the addressing scheme. We have been given this IPv6 subnet. 2001 DB8 ACAD :00C8 : because this is a network address, we don't have a interface ID in here, and it's a /64. These first 4 hextets are the network portion. Now we can break that down. These first 4 hextets, the first 64 bits, this is our prefix here. We can break this down into 2 parts. The first part right here is the global routing prefix. The first 3 hextets here, that is your global routing prefix. This 4th hextet, once again, hextets go between these colons. So this is the first hextet, this is the second hextet, third hextet. Those first 3 all belong to the global routing prefix. The 4th hextet, that is the subnet ID. We can go and we can change these values in here to create smaller networks on our network. This is how we go through and create our subnets. And what they're asking for here is we need 4 more subnets for each of the networks. We need a total of 5 networks. Over here, if we look at our diagram, we have 1 network here. We have a second network on PC2. We have a third network with PC3. We have a 4th network here with PC4. And we have a 5th network here that connects up router 1 to router 2. We have 5 networks in total. We need 5 subnets. We need 4 more subnets, each network that is required. Increment the subnets addresses consecutively by 1 to arrive at our 4 required subnets. Complete the table below. Like we talked about, this is our entire IPv6 network address with our prefix on the end. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these down into each field. all we're going to do is just change one value in here. What we're doing here, these first 3 hextets, once again, that's the global routing prefix. The subnet ID, this is the value right here, this 4th hextet, 00C8. That is what we are changing to create our different subnets. Instructions said, increment the subnet addresses consecutively by 1. First one here is 00C8. Add 1 to that. That takes the 8 to a 9. That one starts with a 9. Then we add 1 to that. And remember, hexadecimal means we have 16 numbers. If we add 1 to 9, we don't get 10. What we get is the next value, the one of those 16, and that would be a value of A at this point. Oops, sorry, wrong field. This was a 9. Add 1 to that, that gives us A. If we add 1 to A, that gives us B. And then add 1 more to get us to our 4th one, our last one, and that is C. These are the values of the 4 subnets, the 4 additional subnets that are required. Step 2, configure IPv6 addressing on routers and PCs. Okay, we're going to go ahead and set that up. First thing, assign or complete the addressing table above to use as a guide for configuring the devices. And they're talking about completing this table. Everything is filled in except for these 5 fields. We need to go through and figure out what these 5 fields are. They give us some insight on how we should do that. First thing, assign the first IP address in the subnet to the router LAN interfaces. That would be these interfaces right here. These interfaces, whoops. That would be these interfaces right here. If we mouse over these, we can see that this is gig 00. This should be gig 01. Up here, we have gig 00, and mousing over that, that is gig 01. These are our 4 LAN interfaces we have to configure. Assign the first IP address. If we scroll up, we can see that in our chart, this was the first one they gave us. Remember, it ends in C8. This was given to us right here. This was C8. That was given to us. That's the first one they're using here. And so the second one would use this network address because it has to be on a different network. Routers connect up different networks, so they have to be on that. This is the next there. And if we look, we can actually see this is the interface. Router 1, gig 01 LAN. What I'm going to do is just copy this address and put it into each of the LAN interfaces, each of the gig interfaces on R1, R2. When I paste these in here, then all I have to do is go through and modify this a little bit. We are looking at gig 01 on router 1. Gig 01 on our router 1 had a subnet of 00C9, and we have to use the first IP address. Well, we have to change the subnet to C9, and we already have the interface ID set as 1. And so this would be the IP address here that you're using. The R2 gig 00 interface, that was on the subnet of 00CA. Come up here, change that to 00CA. Already has an interface ID of 1. This is the IPv6 address you'd be assigning to the gig 01 interface. Last local interface we have to assign is the gig 01. You scroll down here, R2 gig 01, that was this network. Looking here, our subnet ID is 00CB. We need to go and make sure that is set correctly. 00CB. Our interface ID is 1. That's the first IP address. This is the IP address you'd be assigning to the gig 01 interface. That takes care of our first bullet point. On to the second bullet point. Assign the link local addresses as designated in the address table. We have the link local addresses. Here we have them. They're set up. Notice, I've said before, you could use the same link local address on the different networks, but what they're doing here, what we're doing is we're using a different interface ID just to identify that this is on router 2. You could use the interface ID right here of 1, make these 6 addresses all the same, but we're trying to keep it a little bit more simpler so you can keep track of it in your head. We're using the interface ID of 2 because we're on router 2 at this point in time. Assign the link local addresses as designated in the address table. So they want us to go and set up, but I want to fill out this table first. I want to get these last 2 fields filled in before we start assigning IP addresses. For the connection between the routers, assign the first address in the subnet to R1. This is the connection here. If we look, mouse over the triangle, it's going to say this is serial 000 on R1. On R1, serial 000, that is part of this network right here. This is the network address, 2000 db8 ACAD 00CC. I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to copy these addresses into 2 remaining fields, and then we're going to modify them as necessary. Coming back down here, for the connection between the routers, assign the first address in the subnet to R1. Over here, once again, it's serial 00. This gets the first address into the subnet. The subnet here is 00CC. That gets the first address on R1. Coming up here, here's R1, serial 000. We need to change that to the correct subnet ID, which was 00CC. And then that's the first address. For the connection between the routers, assign the second address to the subnet, or the second address in the subnet to R2. That is down here on R2, serial 000. Up here, here's R2, serial 00. We need to change to the correct subnet number. That once again was 00CC. And to give it to the second IP address. Got to change this from a 1 for our interface ID to a 2. Set all 4 hosts to automatically configure with IP version 6 addresses. Okay, let's go ahead and assign these. Notice here we have red pointed downward triangles. That means something's wrong. Basically, we have to go through and configure these. We have to set up the IP addresses, and once again, as long as we're configuring IP addresses, we should make sure that we turn those devices on. I'm going to go ahead, click on R1. I'm going to scroll up to our table because our table has all of our information. We need to set in all of these IP addresses. We need to set in the link local addresses, and then we need to turn it on. I'm on R1, the command line. Go ahead and enter. Give me some clear working area. We are in user exec mode. Need to get into privilege exec mode. Go ahead and type enable. Hit enter. Our prompt changes from the greater than sign to the pound sign. We need to enter into global configuration mode. That's config T. Notice our prompt changes from the waffle sign to config in parentheses with the waffle sign. Now we can go into the interface and set our IP version 6 addresses. First interface here is interface space G0/0. Hit enter. Our prompt now changes. We're in interface configuration mode. We can go ahead and set our IP version 6 addresses. Command here is IP version 6 space address space, and then our IP version 6 address. We're on gig 00. This is it right here. Go ahead and type that in. 2001 :db8 :ACAD : 00C8. 1. Because we are setting an IP address, we need to include that prefix, that slash number, /64. Cisco being Cisco, no news is good news. If we would have typed in something wrong, they would have gave us an error or a warning. Now we need to go and type in or enter in our IP version 6 link local address. Command is IP version 6 space address. Then we put in the address FE 80::1 FE 80::1 because this is a link local address. We don't put the prefix in there. We don't put the slash number, but we put the option of link-local. That sets it as a link local address. There we go. We have set the address for router 1 gig 00, the IP version 6 addresses. Now let's go ahead and work on the interface for gig 01. As we're working, notice our completion is going up. We are now at 11% completion after setting those IP addresses. To change interfaces, we don't have to exit out and type in interface G01. We can just type in interface or INT G01 as long as we're configuring an interface already. Go ahead and hit enter, and we have now switched to configuring. Oh, I need to type that in correctly. E0 interface G0/1. We are now configuring interface G01. Here is our IP version 6 information that we came up with. We're going to go ahead, enter that information in. IP version 6 address 2001:DB8:ACAD:00C9::1 with our prefix /64. Hit enter, and then we need to set up our link local address. IP version 6 address of FE 80::1 and no prefix again, and the option of link-local. Sets that up, and the last thing we have to do is set up our serial interface. And notice we are now at 23% completion, so we are making progress. Interface S0/0/0 IP version 6 address of, right here is our IP version 6 address information of 2001:DB8:ACAD :00CC:1 with our prefix of /64. There you go. We need to set up our link local address, IP version 6 space address FE 80::1 space, and then the option of link-local. Once again, no prefix, no slash number in there. That takes care of entering our IP version 6 addressing information on R1. I'm going to go ahead and close that window. Next, we have to do R2. Click on R2. We are in our CLI. Press enter, type enable, get into privileged exec mode, type config T to get into global configuration mode. Then we can go into our first interface. Our first interface we need to configure is G00, INT space G0/0. And we can go ahead and set our IP version 6 addressing, which is right here. IPv6 address 2001:DB8:ACAD:00CA:1. Put our prefix on there, the slash number. There you go. That sets our global unicast address. Now we have to set our link local address, IP version 6 FE 80::1. No prefix, but the option of link-local. I forgot the word address. I hit up arrow, left arrow over, type the word address, put a space in there. There we go. Once again, notice Cisco's process here. No news is good news. I typed the command in here wrong. I forgot the word address in there. It gave me a warning. It gave me an error. Invalid input. I fixed it. I typed the command in correctly. I got no warning. I got no error. Everything is good. No news is good news. That takes care of G00. Now we can move on to G01. Change interfaces. INT space G0/1. Set our IP addresses. IP version 6. Address 2001:DB8:8 ACAD 00CA. I think I said an IP address wrong. We'll find out here shortly. 00CA :1 with our prefix /64. Enter. Is overlapping with G00 interface. Oh, I'm on I'm on the wrong interface. So that is the correct message. I'm going to up arrow. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to set the right IP address, IP version 6 address. Notice once again, I typed in the command wrong. When you type it in wrong, Cisco lets you know. It gave me an error message right there. This time, hopefully I'll type it in correctly and we won't get an error message. Once again, we are entering in this address right here. 2001:DB8:ACAD:00CB:1. Put our prefix on there. And no news is good news. I got the right address. That takes care of gig 01. Last one to set up here is, oh, I did the wrong link local address. We'll have to go back and fix that. Link local address here for IP version 6 on gig 01. IPv6 space address space FE80::. And once again, we are using ::2 here, so I got to make sure I put the 2, and then no prefix, but space, and then our option of link local. The local correctly. There you go. I need to jump back into G00 and correct this link local address. If we look at the check results right now, go to assessment items. We are on router 2. Router 2 here for G01 is where I set the wrong link local address. Router 2 G00, our link local address is wrong. The other thing, notice I have an X by all these port statuses. I forgot to turn them on. I need to go back in there and do that. Okay, we got our work cut out for us. I hope you're liking this episode on practical configuration examples. Leave a comment on what you think about these configuration examples. If you still have a question or comment, please let me know below. You can also visit my website at KevTechify.com for all of my details and how to get these episodes in video and podcast form. We are on R2. We are going to switch back to the interface of gig 00. Interface gig 0/0. We need to fix the link local address. In order to fix this, what we have to do is first delete it and then re-enter in the correct address. To delete an IP address, you put the word no, and then you put the command you use to enter in that IP address. I'm going to go ahead and enter it. No space IPv6 space address space FE80::1. That was the wrong address. And once again, that was a link local option. That removes it. Now we can go ahead and enter in the correct one. IPv6 FE80::2. Forgot the keyword of address again. Add that in. And our prefix. You guys get to see all this working. But as you can see, I'm slowly working through the process. And it's not a prefix because it's link local. You have to put the option of link local in there. Took us a while to get there, but we have that set. And of course, last thing we need to do is a no shutdown. There we go. Our interface has changed up. Our line protocol has changed up. We have done good. Let's go on, go back in and turn gig 01 interface on. And so I can go in and type int gig 0/1, enter. Turn it on by doing a no shutdown. We get our 2 updates, interface change to up and line protocol change to up. Last thing we have to do on R2 is set the IPv6 address, the link local address, and turn that on. To change interfaces, all we have to do is int space s0/0/0. Now we can set our IPv6 global unicast address, IPv6 space address 2001:db8:acad:, here is the address, our subnet ID of 00cc : and once again this had the second IP address in there. We're going to go ahead and put a 2 because we're setting the IP address. We put our prefix in there. No news is good news. Now, last thing we have to do, or sorry, second to last thing is set the link local address, IPv6 address of FE80::2 space, and then it's a link local option. There we go. And we have to activate the port, turn it back on. That command once again is no space shut down. No shutdown. Okay, notice it said change state to down, but we're going for change state up. What's happening is, if you look here, we turned on this serial 000 interface, but remember, I forgot to turn on the interfaces up here. You have to have both sides of those connections on before it changes to state up, line protocol up. You have to turn that on. I turned on this side. Now when I go back over to R1 and turn on these interfaces, this will come up. Let's go ahead and do that right now. Click on R1. We are coming in there. Let's change to interface G0/0. I mean, we can read that we are on serial 000, but just to make sure, let's put the interface in there. We have to do a no shutdown. Turns our interface on. Notice that it's going through the process. It's going through the auto negotiation on the switch, where we get in auto negotiation for speed, duplex, all that stuff. In a second here, it'll turn green. In the meantime, I'm going to go into interface G0/1. Do a no shutdown there. Line or interface goes up, line protocol goes up. It starts to do its auto negotiation. That should turn green here in a second. While we're waiting, oh, there it is. The first one just turned green. So we got a good connection there. Let's go into our serial interface, int space s0/0/0, and do a no shutdown. Now, I'm not going to hit enter right away. I want you to look at this. It's down right here. We turned on R2, the bottom one. Now we're going to turn on R1 on the top. Notice what happens. Our interface has changed state to up. We've got green. Give it a second. Line protocol will become up. There we go. We now have all green lights on our network. If we come over here and look at our completion is at 85%. 85% completion after step 2. Actually, no, we're not done with step 2, but we are done configuring all the routers and switches. I'm at 85% completion. I'm going to click on check results. Come in here to the assessment tab. Looking here, we still have PC 1, 2, 3, and 4 stuff to do, but everything else is turned on except for IPv6 unicast routing. Remember, IPv6 routing, unicast routing, is not turned on by default. You actually have to go and turn it on. IPv4 routing, that's turned on by default. It's functional. You turn on your device. IPv4 routing is turned on. IPv6 is not, because some companies need it, some companies don't. You have to go in and enable it. We have to go and do that on both R1 and R2. I'm going to go ahead and close here the results. We need to go into both R1 and R2 and turn on IP unicast routing. Coming back here, we are in interface configuration mode. To turn on IPv6 unicast routing, we need to be in privileged exec mode. We'll type in exit, type in an exit again. We are at the pound sign right here. And so we have IPv6 unicast dash routing. Valid input. Oh, I got the wrong mode. You do have to be in global configuration mode because you are making a change. So config T. IPv6 unicast routing. There you go. No news is good news. And actually, a lot of times as I'm going through and programming routers, especially if it's a command I haven't used all that much or I just haven't done, sometimes I do get the wrong mode. And typing in this exact command, it's typed exactly right, it's spelled correctly, it has the spaces in, it has the dashes and spaces in the right places. I was in the wrong mode, and this is the error message you're going to get. I changed modes, I entered in that exact same command, and it's working. Let's go ahead and do this on R2. R2 we are in, I'm going to hit enter here in the window. We are in interface configuration mode. I type in exit, take us to global configuration mode. I'm going to go ahead and type IPv6, version 6, and that's where we do unicast routing. I typed in UN, I hit tab, turns it on. There we go. Now that I've done that, I got completion up to 90%. This was for just configuration of the routers. I'm going to do check results on the asset items. We still have to work on some PCs, but now we have everything on R1 and R2. We have that configured. We have all green check marks. So we have done that really good now. Last part of step 2 here is set all 4 hosts to automatically configure with IPv6 addresses. What we need to do is go into the IP address configuration. I'm going to go up here, click on PC1. On the desktop tab, I'm going to click on IP configuration. Right now it's set under IPv6 configuration. It's set to static. We need to set it to auto config. I clicked on the auto config. It generated our IPv6 address. What happened here is it got information from our router on how we should generate our address. And what it said is use our network portion. That's the first 4 hextets, 2001 DB8 ACAD:C8. It dropped the 2 leading zeros. And then for the last part, use the EUI-64. That uses the MAC address, inserts FFE in the center, and then inverts the 7th bit. So right here, and actually we can see it better down here, these first 4 numbers, actually first 6, we have some dropping leading zeros and stuff. That's the first, this is the first half of the MAC address all the way up to the FF, and then this is the last half of the MAC address. They inserted the FFE in the center, and then they inverted the 7th bit, which is right here, of the MAC address. That generated our randomly generated IPv6 link or IPv6 address, and then they use that same process to generate our linked local address. Go through PC2, do the same thing again. IP configuration under IPv6, click auto config, generates that. Once again, this is our MAC address with FFE8 or FFFE in the center. Invert the 7th bit using the EUI64 process. Go PC3, IP configuration, auto config, close that up, and finally our last PC. IP configuration under IPv6, click on configuration, generates our IPv6 address. There you go. At this point in time, you should have completion of 100%. I'm going to go ahead and click on check results, go to the asset tab. Here is all the items that are being checked. Notice we have all green check marks. If you have a red check mark, go back in there, fix that address, and then you should be good to go. Step 3, verify IPv6 connectivity. What should happen is all these devices should be able to ping everything else. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick on PC1 here. I'm going to click on that, open up the command prompt. I'm going to scroll up to the top looking at the addressing table, and then I'm just going to ping all 6 of these addresses to show that we have connectivity. And so we start off by typing ping space and then our first IP address right here for router 1 gig 00. 2001:DB8:00C9:1. That should be our default gateway. That should work just fine. The next address, I'm going to ping the G01 interface. The only difference here is the subnet ID, we incremented it by 1. In Windows, if you use the up arrow key, I'm going to hit it once, it brings up our previous command. What I need to do is just change that subnet ID. And so I pinged the G01. I want to ping G00. Apparently I'm doing it out of order. All I have to do is change that to an 8. There we go. We are pinging that. Now let's ping the serial 00 interface. The subnet ID here, the 3rd or 4th hextet is 00CC. Up arrow, left arrow over, changing that to 00CC, pinging it, and it works. Now let's go ahead and ping the IP addresses on R2. Up arrow here again, going over, changing it to what our subnet ID is, that 4th hextet, 00CA. Left arrow over, change that last C to an A. There we go. We are pinging it. It is working. And notice, it does not have to do an ARP request because IP version 6 and ICMP version 6 does not have to do an ARP request or figure out what the MAC address is to ping, to use that IP address. They eliminated that process. They made IP version 6 more efficient. We have to ping next the G00 address. The subnet ID is 00CB. Up arrow once, left arrow over, change the A to a B. There we go. That is working. And the last IP address we're going to check is the serial 00 interface. We have to change the subnet ID to 00CC, and we also need to change the interface ID to 2. Up arrow, changing that once again to 00CC, and then we have to change the interface ID to 2. Pinging R2 serial 00, that works successfully. That shows that we have connectivity on our network. That was Packet Tracer 12.9.1, implement a subnetted IPv6 addressing scheme. It was my pleasure to provide you with this wonderful episode on configuration examples. If you like this episode and you got value out of it, please click that like button, give a 5-star rating, leave a comment. This all helps me bring you more great content. Please take a minute to subscribe to my channel. All my socials and contact information are on my website, KevTechify.com. There you can find out how to get all these episodes in video and podcast form. Thank you so much for watching this episode of my series on practical configuration examples for the CCNA. I've created 4 wonderful playlists for you on the CCNA. These episodes, I go through all the concepts that Cisco calls out for the CCNA. Once again, I'm Kevin. This is KevTechify. I'll see you next time for another great adventure.